אל תהרוג על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תהרוג אליך אלוקים, כאייל תהרוג על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תהרוג אליך אלוקים. צמא נפשי לאלוקים, צמא נפשי לאלוקים, לאלך. מתי יבוא, מתי יבוא וראה פני האלוקים. כאייל תהרוג על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תהרוג אליך אלוקים, כאייל תהרוג על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תהרוג אליך אלוקים. צמא נפשי לאלוקים, צמא נפשי לאלוקים, לאלך. מתי יבוא, מתי יבוא וראה פני האלוקים. כאייל תהרוג על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תהרוג אליך אלוקים. צמא נפשי לאלוקים, צמא נפשי לאלוקים, לאלך. מתי יבוא, מתי יבוא וראה פני האלוקים. כאייל תהרוג על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תהרוג אליך
הדרך אל האושר רצוף העין מכשולים רבים עת לחייך לשמוח גם לדמוע אך מה יפים יפים הם החיים זה הזמן לסלוח לוותר לשכוח גם אם זה קשה שנינו יחד את הכל עוד נשנה לא צריך לברוח את האמת לברוח אני ואת לא נשנה את העולם הזה לא צריך לברוח את האמת לברוח אני ואת לא נשנה את העולם הזה את שתי עיניי נושא אני למעלה מבקש תשובות לשאלה אין מענה ואיש גם לא יודע האם בסוף הדרך ניפגש זה הזמן לסלוח לוותר לשכוח גם אם זה קשה שנינו יחד את הכל עוד נשנה לא צריך לברוח את האמת לברוח אני ואת לא נשנה את העולם הזה לא צריך לברוח את האמת לברוח אני ואת לא נשנה את העולם הזה זה הזמן לסלוח לוותר לשכוח גם אם זה קשה שנינו יחד את הכל עוד נשנה לא צריך לברוח את האמת לברוח אני ואת לא נשנה את העולם הזה
שלום לך דודי, הצח והאדמון, שלום לך מעת, רקח ומורימון. שלום לך דודי, הצח והאדמון, שלום לך מעת, רקח ומורימון. שלום לבית דודי לקראת אחותך ערוס, צנע להושיע, מוצלח כבן ישי, רבה בני המון. שלום לך דודי, הצח והאדמון, שלום לך בעת, רקח ומורימון. שלום לבית דודי יפהפייה, התעוררי אהבה, מצלצלי קולך, נגיד בכל פעם. שלום לך דודי, הצח והאדמון, שלום לך בעת, רקח ומורימון. שלום לבית דודי, אשר לך דודי, הצח והאדמון. שלום לך באמת, רק החמור אימון. שלום לבן דודי.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. I am Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. And this week we are going to be studying Leviticus chapter 23. So first let's start off. Shabbat Shalom, Debbie. And Shabbat Shalom, Marianana, Miknana, Banana. Shabbat Shalom, Martha. I haven't seen you in a while. Hope everything is well with you. And of course, Shabbat Shalom, Tsuri. So first of all, let's do a sound check. Can you guys hear me okay, first of all? So please, if you can hear me okay, just type in a Y or a 1 in the comments so I know you guys can hear me and see me okay. Somebody type in a Y. Okay, very good. Okay, good. If the sound goes bad or if the internet gets disconnected or something like that, the best way to let me know would be on WhatsApp, for those of you who have my WhatsApp number, or to type a comment in the comments or somehow or another to get my attention. It happens, you know, every so often, and that's just the way it is. Okay, so let's see. What can I start off by saying? Yeah, I just here in Katsrin in the Golan Heights. I'm very, very happy here. I integrate well into the English-speaking Jewish community here because everybody in the English-speaking Jewish community here is a little bit different, a little bit off the beaten path. You don't end up here in the Golan Heights unless you are, and I certainly fit into that category. That goes without saying. So I'm very happy here in the Golan Heights. I'm very happy to be back in Israel. I've been back in Israel now since June. So we're coming up on, December, January. So we're at 7.5 months, something like that. And I will be taking a trip back to the United States next week. I'll be leaving next Sunday. I'll be back on, believe it or not, on Inauguration Day. My flight lands in the United States, if it's still there, if it hasn't burnt down to the ground. And so if anybody is going to be in the New York area and wants to get together, I should be there for about a month is the plan. I'll be in the United States for about a month. So that is the bottom line. I announced already officially a couple months ago that we want to start our Karaite community, our live World Alliance of Qara'im community here in Katsrin in the Golan Heights. I truly think it's the ideal place to do so. First of all, as I mentioned, the people here are very open-minded, independent thinking. I really haven't gotten any negative feedback. Pretty much the entire English-speaking community where I spend time with, where I go to synagogue, since we don't have a Karaite synagogue here yet. They may not agree with me or understand exactly why I reject the quote-unquote oral law, but there's been more curiosity, I think, than anything else, and that's a very good sign. And the Golan Heights is beautiful, especially this time of year. Everything's greening up. This wildflowers are starting to come out. The shkediot, the almond trees are starting to blossom. There's snow on Mount Hermon, the tallest mountain in Israel, which forms part of the northern border between Israel and Lebanon. It's just gorgeous, and people here are very into nature. They're very into natural healing. They're very into organic food, homemade food. I know a lot of people who make things like kimchi and kombucha and homemade pickles and sauerkraut and all of these kinds of things. And that's, very, very typical of the people here. A lot of people who are very into like natural healing and homemade foods. People I know have chickens, and they raise their own chickens and get eggs from the chickens. It's that kind of atmosphere, and there's plenty of open land here. For those who don't like, I wouldn't even call Katsrin a city. It's like a small town, beautiful, beautiful small town, in my opinion. A very varied type, population of people. And for those who don't like that, then there's plenty of open spaces around, small settlements, and just open space. It's just a wonderful place. And the Sea of Galilee is right nearby. From certain parts of Katsrin, you could see spectacular views of the Sea of Galilee. Sea of Galilee is about a 20-minute drive from here, and it's just gorgeous. It's spectacular. So you have the sea. I mean, the Sea of Galilee is so big, you sometimes feel like you're standing at the ocean. Not quite, but that's how big it is. It's not like a little lake. It's this huge, huge sea that from north to south you can kind of just barely see from tip to tip if you're standing on the north. If it's a very clear day, you can make out the south, but if not, it looks like you're looking out into the ocean. That's how big it is. It's got, decent sized waves. I mean, nothing like the Pacific Ocean or even the Atlantic Ocean or anything like that, but it's definitely feels like a big sea, and it's just wonderful. So come on down if you want advice on. I'm not an immigration or an aliyah expert by no means, but I can give general advice on how to get started. If you want to make aliyah to Israel, or if you already live in Israel, or if you're already an Israeli citizen, then come on, come all. Let's get a World Alliance of Qara'im. Let's get a real Karaite community going that's not part of the Egyptian Karaites who are so stuck in their ways. I do have, in a certain degree, respect for the Egyptian Karaites. Some of them, because sometimes they are willing to fight, but mostly they just like to crawl into their little corner and hope that nobody notices them. And I don't have much respect for that aspect of them. There are a couple of fighters out there, but we at the World Alliance of Qara'im, we want to get rid of all the nonsense of the Egyptian Karaites that they've dragged through mud for the past couple of 100 years, getting closer and closer to the Rabbinites, acting somewhat like the Rabbinites, same prayers as the Rabbinites, the same services, or some of the same rituals as the Rabbinites, like Havdalah. Sounds almost like rabbinical Havdalah. And we want to establish a true Karaite, neo-Karaite, Chozrim b'Tanach, as I like to call the movement, Chozrim b'Tanach, returning to Tanakh movement here in the north of Israel. The north of Israel is hands down, in my opinion, the most beautiful part of Israel. Jerusalem is incredibly special. The deserts are incredibly special, but the north of Israel, there's something really, really, really special about it. And in Katsrin, you just feel like you're in a different country to a certain degree. You ask sometimes whether you're in Israel or not, or are you somewhere like in the Swiss Alps or something like that. It's gorgeous up here. It really is. So come all, let's establish our Karaite community. If you know anyone who's interested, send them my way, and we will talk. Okay, so here we go. We're going to be starting Leviticus chapter 23. So now we are really on a downhill on Leviticus. We've gotten through by far the most difficult chapters. Leviticus starts off very, very difficult. It starts off with the details, the minutia of the laws of the sacrifices, of the offerings, and then goes on to the minutia of ritual purity and impurity, quote unquote, the cooties, and how to cure yourself of the cooties. And then after that, it also goes on to some very detailed laws about the sacrifices, about the Kohanim, etc. But once we get to about Leviticus 21, 22, we get to much more accessible material. And this week we're starting Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23 is very, very, I can never say straightforward because there's always, depth to it, but much more accessible than some of the previous chapters that we've covered. This is Leviticus chapter 23 deals with the biblical holidays. It's basically a list of the biblical holidays, when they occur, and what you're supposed to do on these biblical holidays. As Karaites, this is one of the chapters we probably refer to most. So there have been probably hundreds, if not thousands of times over the years that I've referred to Leviticus chapter 23 when I wanted to point something out about Passover, Hakham Melech, as it's really called, when I wanted to point something out about how Rosh Hashanah doesn't exist, but Yom Teruah does, and many other things. So this is a very interesting chapter. We're not going to linger on it in great detail because we're constantly coming back to it anyway, but we will point many important things out. And so that's what to look forward to in this study. But first we want to start off. So Debbie, who's here right now, Debbie Shaltiel, was curious about whether the Masoretes were Karaites, So first, we need to understand very briefly, for those of you who don't know who the Masoretes were. So the Masoretes were basically a clan or dynasty that stretched approximately 5 generations of scribes who lived in around the 800s through the 1000s in Tiberias mostly. And they were basically responsible, one could say, for giving the Tanakh, the Torah and the Tanakh in Hebrew, its modern format. They added a number of different things, such as the nikud, also known as the vowelization or the vocalization. They added the ta'amim, which are essentially punctuation marks within the text, and they finalized not only the written form of the text, which they seem to have copied very, very diligently, letter for letter, without omitting a certain letter, but also what's called the reading tradition, the way that words would not only appeared in the text of the Torah, but the way they were also they're also pronounced or recited in public readings. And so we have this concept of the kri, the ketiv and the kri. Ketiv from the Hebrew word kotev or katav, which means to write, and the kri from the Hebrew word kore, which means to read aloud. And sometimes sometimes a word can be written in the Torah, which is in the written text of the Torah, which is pronounced differently when it's read aloud for various reasons. Sometimes it's a completely different word, because maybe the original word is considered inappropriate to say out loud. There's a famous example, for instance, where the word ophalim, which means like hemorrhoids, is read aloud as the word torim, which means something like swellings or something like that. So a euphemism. It wasn't thought that the word ophalim, hemorrhoids, was appropriate to be said in synagogue. So the reading tradition became different, and the Masoretes go to extensive lengths to record it. The bottom line is, basically, every single Hebrew Tanakh that you pick up, with few exceptions, are going to be based on one or more of the Masoretic texts. The most famous probably being the Aleppo Codex, which unfortunately was partially destroyed, and much of it disappeared in I believe it was 1947 or 1948, thereabouts, when the Jews were expelled from Syria at the founding of the state of Israel. There was a fire in the synagogue in Aleppo in Syria, the same Syria we're talking about more or less now, that's been in the news lately. And the Aleppo Codex was considered it was the crown. It's, in fact, in Hebrew, it's even called Keter Aram Soba. It's the crown of all the Masoretic texts, was sadly partially damaged. However, there are other texts, perhaps some of them derivative from the Keter Aram Soba, from the Aleppo Codex, which are complete. The most famous probably being the Leningrad Codex. It's a complete copy of the entire Tanakh, and many Hebrew and also therefore English translations are based on the Leningrad Codex. We won't go now through all of some of the more common and some of the more important Masoretic texts, but suffice it to say there are 5 which are considered the 5 most important Masoretic texts that are extant today, either in part or in whole. And these were all written down by these guys, the Masoretes. Let's go just very briefly, just to get a formal understanding of who these guys were. Let's go to my favorite rabbi. I don't like many rabbis, as you know, but there is one rabbi, Rabbi Wikipedia. He's very knowledgeable. He doesn't charge a lot for weddings or brit milahs. His prices are very reasonable. And let's learn very briefly about the Masoretes. Find it. I'll share the screen. And then we can get on to talking a little bit about, I don't know who this person is, but hello, Daniel, whoever you are. Hi, let's see how we're gonna do this. I think I gotta go like this for now. Okay, let me share the screen. A little bit differently. So this is the Masoretes. So let's learn just a bit about who they are, okay? So the Masoretes, masters of the tradition, or Balei HaMesorah, were groups of Jewish scribe scholars who worked from around the end of the 5th through 10th centuries CE, based primarily in the Jewish centers of the Levant, Tiberias, and Jerusalem, and Mesopotamia, Sura, and Nehardea. Okay. So there are 3 main Masoretic traditions. One is called the Tiberian, the other is called the Babylonian, and the third is called the Palestinian, just meaning the Israeli. But the one we're going to focus on really is the Tiberian Masoretes, and we'll talk about them a bit. Each group compiled a system of pronunciation and grammatical guides in the form of diacritical notes, nikud, on the external form of the biblical text in an attempt to standardize the pronunciation, paragraph, and verse divisions, and cantillation. Cantillation means the way a verses are sung. Cantillation, literally related to the word, if you know Spanish, like cantar, which means to sing, or chant, it would be an English cognate of that word. So the way it's sing-song, the way that the Torah is sung in synagogues of the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh for the worldwide Jewish community. So the Ben Asher family is probably the most famous clan of Masoretes. So let's talk about them, or let's learn about them. So the Ben Asher family of Masoretes was largely responsible for the preservation and production of the Masoretic text, although there existed alternative Masoretic text of Ben Naphtali, and I think Debbie wanted to speak about Ben Naphtali. Masoretes, which has around 875 differences from the Ben Asher text. The halachic authority, Maimonides, endorsed the Ben Asher as superior, although Egyptian Jewish scholar the Saadia Gaon had preferred the Ben Naphtali system. It has been suggested that the Ben Asher family and the majority of Masoretes were Karaites. However, Jeffrey Kahn believes, and we're going to study his words on this, believes that the Ben Asher family was probably not Karaite, and Aaron Dotan avers that there are decisive proofs that that Moshe ben Asher was not a Karaite. So that's the question. Were the Masoretes Karaites? Specifically, were the Ben Asher family Karaites? So we're going to look at Jeffrey Kahn and see what he says. He's not the only opinion out there. There are still, as we see, some opinions that they were Karaites. Maybe we can even look at this opinion. Let's see. Let's even look at this opinion if we can. It's 5. Maybe it's a starting point. It would be good to look at this. So this is probably the most famous Masoret, Aaron ben Moses ben Asher. He is the one who was responsible for editing or writing, really editing or adding the Nikud, adding the marks to the Aleppo Codex. And let's read this opinion about him and see if it says anything about whether he was a Karaite or not. Make this a bit bigger so everybody can see. So Aaron ben Moses ben Asher lived in Tiberias. Where's Tiberias? Tiberias is about 40 minutes from where I live here in Katsrin. And if those of you, if we do start up when we do start up a Karaite community here in Katsrin, once again, come one, come all, then we can visit Tiberias and we can actually visit sites that are relevant to the Masoretes. So Tiberias, I was in Tiberias actually just the other day. That's the nearest Department of Motor Vehicles in Tiberias. So I had to go to Tiberias to deal with the Department of Motor Vehicles here in Israel. There's not one in Katsrin, so I had to go there. So we're talking about right on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, kind of the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee. So Ben Asher rapidly gained fame as the most authoritative of the Tiberias Masoretes, and even after his death, his name continued to hold respect. In 989 CE, an unknown scribe of a former prophet's manuscript vouched for the care with which his copy was written, by claiming that he had vocalized and added the Masorah from the books that were vocalized by Aaron ben Moses ben Asher. Again, just showing that this scribe claimed that his manuscript was based on a Aaron ben Moshe ben Asher text. Okay, Rambam, we all know who the Rambam is, medieval famous rabbi who was born in Cordoba, Spain, eventually moved to Fez in Morocco, where I actually, a number of years ago, visited the synagogue where he studied, and then eventually found his way to the Holy Land, and then eventually ended up settling in Fustat, which is basically modern Cairo, where he became very well known by the surrounding communities, and also, if not especially, by the Yemenite Jews, who are not too far away. So Rambam, by accepting the views of Ben Asher, though only in regard to open and closed sections, helped establish and spread his authority, referring to a Bible manuscript then in Egypt. He wrote, all relied on it, since it was corrected by Ben Asher and was worked on and analyzed by him for many years, and was proofread many times in accordance with the Masorah, and I based myself on this manuscript in the Sefer Torah that I wrote. And this is speaking about the Aleppo Codex. So the Aleppo Codex was not always in Aleppo, in Syria. Again, what is the Aleppo Codex? It is the most authoritative and the most famous of the Masoretic texts. And it is now sadly has been destroyed and partially missing. Maybe one of the most tragic events in modern Torah history, one could say, has been the destruction and partial disappearance of the Aleppo Codex, but it's now in Jerusalem, in partially in the Israel Museum, or maybe all in the Israel Museum, or in the National Library of Israel. So let's see if we can move ahead. So we want to ask: was this Aaron ben Moses ben Asher? Was he a Karaite? Okay, so he wrote a book called Sefer Diktutei Ta'amim, which was kind of an early grammar book of biblical Hebrew, and explained some of the Masoretic decisions, or some of the Masoretic processes that he used. But let's see. Speaking specifically, so here, this article says, from documents found in the Cairo Geniza. So what is the Cairo Geniza? The Cairo Geniza is also very famous. It was discovered, I believe it was the late 1800s by Solomon Schechter, if I'm not mistaken. It was basically a storage center in one of the old synagogues in Fustat, which once again is basically near, or essentially modern day Cairo. And documents dating back centuries were found in this Cairo Geniza. It provided a huge insight into Jewish history over a period of approximately 1,000 years. Okay, at any rate, so this article is claiming that his family was Karaites. Okay, should not be surprising to discover that many Masoretes so involved in the Masorah held Karaite beliefs. After all, it was the Karaites who placed such absolute reliance on the Torah text. It would be natural that they would devote their lives to studying every aspect of it. Okay, so this really doesn't say much, doesn't give any proofs as to whether Ben Asher was a Karaite or not. I'll just read this paragraph here. It was known that Saadia Gaon was an enemy of the Karaites, by the way, and he wrote polemics against the Karaites. He also lived in Egypt. Had written against the Karaites. In his critique, Saadia mentioned a Ben Asher. Until recently, it never occurred to Jewish scholars to associate the Ben Asher of Saadia's diatribe with the famous Aaron ben Asher of Tiberias. After all, Aaron ben Asher was respected through the Jewish world. The Karaites were considered outsiders. It was unthinkable that traditional normative Jews would accept the work of a Karaite. Recent research indicates, however, that it is probable that the subject of Saadi's attack was Aaron ben Moses ben Asher. So I think the point they're trying to make here is, if Saadia Gaon, who was such an enemy of the Karaites, was attacking Aaron ben Moses ben Asher, even though he was known throughout the Jewish world, or throughout much of the Jewish world, as the best scribe of the Torah, then why would he attack him? He would attack him. I think the implication here is that the article is saying that the reason he would attack him is because he was a Karaite. In other words, Saadia, I don't like to call him Saadia Gaon. Saadia Gaon means Saadia, the pride of Israel, or Saadia, the genius. I just call him Saadia al-Fayumi because he was from Fayum. And so Saadia al-Fayumi, the fact that he would attack this brilliant scribe, the most well-respected scribe of the Torah, for no other reason, or for no reason, shows that maybe he attacked him just because he was a Karaite. Because Saadia al-Fayumi was a known enemy of the Karaites. And here with this, in his work Sefer Diktutei Ta'amim, Aaron ben Asher wrote, the prophets complete the Torah and are as, well, no, this cannot be happening now. Someone's trying to call me, and it's very annoying. Let me put on Do Not Disturb. 1 second, please. How do I get Do Not Disturb on here? Okay, the person won't call back. At any rate, In his work, Sefer Diktutei Ta'amim, Aaron ben Asher wrote the prophets complete with the Torah are as the Torah, and we decide the law from them as we do from the Torah. That's pretty Karaitic, very much so. Okay. There's also forced scholars to re-evaluate the relationship between Jews and Karaites in the 10th century, despite the writings of Sadia Gaon. In other words, what this paragraph is trying to say is if Aaron ben Asher was indeed a Karaite, and his version, his manuscripts of the Torah were considered so authoritative, then maybe the rift between the Karaites and the Rabbinites wasn't as great as many people might have previously thought. Okay, so that's the opinion of this article. But we're also going to look at Jeffrey Kahn. And Jeffrey Kahn, hi, Yona. And Jeffrey Kahn has his own opinion regarding this. And in order to do so, hold on 1 second, please. Just have to turn up the heat and drop, as you guys know. And I bitch about every Shabbat. I don't have a sound editor. I don't have a video editor. So I got to take care of everything myself. So once in a while I have to do stupid things like turn up the heat, turn down the heat, deal with internet problems, deal with sound problems. Right now I'm going to drink. My throat is dry. Okay. So now let's look at the writings of Jeffrey Kahn. So I'm looking at a book called The Tiberian Pronunciation of, the Tiberian Pronunciation Tradition of Biblical Hebrew, Volume 1. This book is available for free online. And it is just an incredible read. Jeffrey Kahn, who, by the way, despite the Jewish sounding name, he spells it K-H-A-N rather than not K-A-H-N. And this book he's a brilliant scholar. He's probably one of the leading scholars in the world of ancient Semitic languages, ancient and modern Semitic languages. And this entire book is specifically on the Masoretic traditions, or very specifically the Tiberian Masoretic traditions. Remember, we said there are 3 Masoretic traditions: the Tiberian, the Babylonian, and the Palestinian. But the one we're most familiar with, and the one that just about all Hebrew Torahs are based on, is the Tiberian tradition. Okay, again, coming from Tiberias, which is a hop, skip, and a jump away from where I am right now in Katsina in the Golan Heights. So this book, let me just show it to you. So you Google it, and then you go to Open Book Publishers. Okay, right here, you can read it online or download it as a PDF for free. But I'll tell you, before you do, I'll give you some insight as to whether you should or not. You can also order it as a printed edition. This publishing company, the Open Book Publishers, they are I guess a group of authors and publishers who believe that information should be provided free or at very inexpensive prices. So instead of charging hundreds and hundreds of dollars for essentially what is it, a 700-page text, I think the printed edition is something like $40. When I go back to the United States, I'm going to order it. Actually, I'm going to order it while I'm here, and it'll be waiting for me when I get back to the United States. So you can find it online for free. It's called The Tiberian Pronunciation Tradition of Biblical Hebrew by Jeffrey Kahn. So again, you see he spells his name K-H-A-N, and not K-A-H-N. K-A-H-N would be the way that the Jews would spell it. K-H-A-N actually is, even though it sounds like Khan, which is a common, not so common, but a known Hebrew last name, which actually is Kohen, basically. He's not Jewish. I think he's a whole bunch of things, but I think he's Persian and part American Indian. I don't remember. He's a whole mix of different things, but he's not Jewish. But nonetheless, it is a brilliant book. However, before you start downloading it for free, I would warn everybody that it is extremely, extremely technical, long, and detailed. So unless you're really into the minutia of Hebrew grammar, of the history of, or the development of Hebrew texts, specifically the Tanakh, over the years, and all kinds of very detailed information regarding those issues. And I really, what the focus of the book is how to pronounce his opinion, or his study on how to pronounce biblical Hebrew, or shall we say Hebrew according to this Tiberian Masoretic tradition. That's really what the essence of this book is. But it's very long. It's very technical. You can see it's 764 pages long, the PDF, and it's very technical. So before you download it, make sure you're up to studying something like that, because it's not an easy read. It's not like reading. It's not like reading something in Reader's Digest. It's very, very long and very technical. But if you are into that stuff, excuse me, then it's absolutely fascinating. So let's see what Jeffrey Kahn has to say. So we're in the same book, the Tiberian Pronunciation Tradition of Biblical Hebrew. We are on page 30. And Jeffrey Kahn speaks about whether the Masoretes were Karaites or not. And as was alluded to earlier, he believes they were not. But the story is a bit more complicated than that. So let's read what he has to say. Okay, we're here. Just make sure everybody can see the screen. No, you can't see the screen. Why can't you see the screen? Because I'm not sharing the right part of the screen, which is very bad on my part. Stop. Present. Share screen. And window. And such. And there we go. Okay. So once again, since I wasn't sharing the screen correctly, here, this is the book. If you want to screenshot it or something like that, or if you want to jot down the name, I can even put it in the chat. If you Google it, then you'll be able to download it for free or order it. Okay. So what does Jeffrey Kahn have to say? Make sure everybody can see the screen now. Yes. So towards the end of the Masoretic period, in the second half of the 10th century, so in other words, the 950s or so, or 950s and beyond, and the 11th century, many Karaite scholars became involved with the Tiberian Masoretic tradition. Some studies have shown, oops, let's try that again. Some studies have shown that the Masoretic notes in some Tiberian Bible codices, including the Aleppo Codex, contain some elements that appear to reflect Karaite rather than Rabbinite theology. And what are we talking about when we're talking about the Masoretic notes? So if you look at one of the Masoretic texts, and maybe we will, then you'll see in the margins are notes, and there are basically grammatical notes, and then there are more general notes. And what Jeffrey Kahn is saying, that some of these notes seem to imply Karaite theology. Does this mean that the whole circle of Tiberian Masoretes were Karaites? There are several problems with such a simple assessment. The medieval sources refer to several. Let's go to the next page. Let's get back here. Refer to several generations of Masoretes, some of them belonging to the same family. They indicate that the family of the famous Masorete Aaron ben Asher, that's the one we just spoke about, who wrote the Aleppo Codex, or who placed the Nikud, who placed the not pronunciation, the vocalization marks in the Aleppo Codex, had been involved in Masoretic activities over 5 generations. Aaron ben Asher lived in the 10th century, meaning towards the end of the Masoretic period. And so Asher the elder, who is stated to be the great-great-grandfather of Aaron, is likely to have lived in the second half of the 8th century CE, before the emergence of Karaism on the historical scene. Okay, so Karaites emerged essentially around the time of the Islamic conquests. Within 100 years, the Islamic conquests, well, Islam is dated back to, what is it, 620 CE, thereabouts. So within 100 years is 720, the beginning of the 700s. And so Jeffrey Kahn is claiming that Aaron ben Asher the Older lived only in the second half of the 8th century, meaning the late 700s, and therefore it was really before Karaism had spread out, because Karaism really traces its origins to around the 700s or so. There's no evidence of a Karaite community in Tiberias during the Masoretic period. The immigration of Karaites to Palestine evidently began in the second half of the 9th century and was directed towards Jerusalem. And that was the mourners of Zion coming back to Jerusalem and establishing it around that time. The Karaite synagogue in Jerusalem, which exists to this day. Maybe someday the World Alliance of Qara'im will take it over. Don't tell the Egyptian Karaites I said that. They'll freak out. Okay, some of the Masoretes, furthermore, were closely associated with the Rabbinite Jewish authorities, e.g. Pinchas Rosh Yeshiva, head of the academy, who lived in the 9th century. The academy, yeshiva, was a central body of Rabbinite Jewish communal authority in Palestine. Okay, let's go on here. Some close parallels to the format and phraseology of the Masoretic notes can, in fact, be found in Midrashic literature composed before the Islamic period. And Midrashic literature, so the Midrashic period is generally thought to be the 5th or the year 500 to the year 800 is considered the Midrashic period. The Talmudic period is considered the period 200 to 500 CE. The Midrashic period is 500 to 800 CE, and this is when a lot of what's called the Midrashim were written, such as Bereshit Rabbah as an example. So Midrashic literature composed before the Islamic period, it is likely that these Midrashim were redacted by Jewish sages in Tiberias, which was a thriving center of rabbinic scholarship in the Byzantine period. All this suggests that Karaite scholars joined forces with an existing stream of tradition of Bible scholarship and rabbinic Judaism, enhancing it and developing it. So that's basically Jeffrey Kahn's point of view right there. That sums it up in a sentence. Karaite scholars joined forces with an existing stream of tradition of Bible scholarship, and what he means by that is Masoretes in rabbinic Judaism. So he's saying that the Masoretes, especially the Ben Asher clan, the Ben Asher dynasty, were rabbinites, and then at a certain point, Karaite scholars, when Karaism began spreading throughout Israel from Jerusalem, that they joined in, enhancing it and developing it. That's basically his point of view. Let's continue. The Karaites contributed to the Tiberian Masoretic tradition in various ways. They sponsored the safekeeping of model Masoretic codices produced by the Masoretes. This is shown by the fact that the colophons. So what are colophons? Colophons are basically like the introductory page. Oh, I have to plug in my computer in just a minute. So colophon. Okay. So an inscription placed at the end of a book or manuscript and giving details of its publication, right? So even though it's placed at the end, it really serves as a kind of an introduction to what that text is. Okay. So many of surviving codices indicate that they'd come into the possession of Karaite public institutions, excuse me, such as study houses and synagogues. The Karaites also became involved in the production of accurate copies of Masoretic biblical codices, particularly in the 11th century, after the cessation of the activity of the Tiberian Masoretes. So basically what he's saying is that the Tiberian Masoretes were not Karaites, but at a certain point, towards the close of the Masoretic period, which we could say the close of the Masoretic period was around 1000 CE, The Karaites became more and more involved as they became more prominent in Israel, spreading out from Jerusalem to other places, and so they gained possession of some of the important Masoretic manuscripts. They kept them safe. They were responsible for safekeeping them and copying them. And remember, there was no such thing as a printing press. Everything was manuscripts. Manu meaning hand, like in Spanish, mano, right, or manual, and script meaning write. So written by hand. When we say the word manuscript, which is sometimes thrown around inaccurately, a manuscript very specifically means a document that has been written or copied by hand. Okay. In the late 10th and early 11th century, they produced several Masoretic treatises, talking about the Karaites here, and developed the para-Masoretic philological activity of grammar. Several of the colophons of the model Tiberian also indicate that the codices were used for liturgical reading by Karaite communities on Shabbat's festivals. So, for instance, in the colophon, again, what is this? It's like I guess you can call it the introductory page, even though it appears at the end of the book. And by the way, we should make a distinction, or we should make a definition of what is a codex. A codex is a very specific thing. Codex is what we would call a book, as opposed to a scroll. Whenever you see the word codex, this means that it is a book, a bound book, right? Its pages are folded in half, and then all of the pages are sewn together and bound, and that is a codex. So the Aleppo Codex is not a scroll, it's a book. Why is this important? We're going to see in a second. Okay. Were used for liturgical reading by Karaite communities on Shabbat, Sabbaths, and festivals. And this is what it says in the colophon, or that introductory or extroductory page in the Aleppo Codex, in order that they bring the Codex out to the settlements and communities in the Holy City on the 3 pilgrimage festivals: the Festival of Passover, the Festival of Weeks, and the Festival of Tabernacles, to read in it. Okay. And this is speaking about the Karaites. And how do we know that? I think he's going to make a note here. It's in Hebrew, כדי שיוציאו אל המושבות לקהילות שבעיר הקודש בשלושה רגלים, חג המצות, חג השבועות, it's just a translation of the English here. The point being that on the Shabbat and on the festivals, when he's speaking about bringing it out to the communities, or when the colophon in the Aleppo Codex it says that it's to be brought out to the communities on the Shabbat and on the festivals, it must be speaking about the Karaites. And how do we know this? So how many of you have been to a rabbinical synagogue? I'm assuming some of you, if not all of you. You know that the only type of Torah that they will read from is a scroll. They will not read from a book, right? They take the Torah scroll out of the ark, they march it around, everybody bows down to it and kisses it. And especially on Shabbats and the Chagim, they will not read the Torah from, not even on regular weekdays when they read it on their Monday and Thursday Torah readings. It must be from a scroll. What type of text are we talking about here, or what type of document, manuscript are we talking about here? We're talking about a codex. It wasn't a scroll. But the Karaites did not require that the Torah be read from a scroll. They allowed the Torah also to be read from a codex, from a book. And so therefore, what this is saying is that essentially this Aleppo Codex is brought out to the Karaite communities on the Shabbats. I'm sorry, it doesn't say the Shabbats, on the Shlosha Regalim, the 3 pilgrimage festivals. It must be speaking about the Karaites, because it couldn't be brought out to Rabbinite communities because they would not read from a codex. Okay, that's the point. I have to plug in because my battery's about to go dead. So just hold the phone there. I'm not gonna do a break or anything like that, but I got to grab my charger and plug in. Just give me a second, please. Just take a minute. Okay, just give me one more minute, please. Okay, I'm back. So, right. Let me just make sure everybody can hear and see. You guys can all hear and you guys can all see. Yes, we're good. Somebody give me a Y again, please. Okay, good. Okay, in the colophon, again, the introductory or the extraductory page of the Cairo Codex of the Prophets, again, one of the most important and famous and authoritative of the Masoretic text. This is the Codex, the 8 prophets which Yabes ben Shlomo consecrated in Jerusalem for the Karaites who celebrate the feasts at seeing the moon. We all know about that as Karaites. For them all to read on Sabbath days, at new moons, and at feasts. Okay? And then Tuferkovich, I'm not sure which one that is, B34, I'm not really sure. But another one of the Masoretic texts, the colophon says, this Bible should be taken to one of the settlements in which there are Karaite communities on Sabbaths and festivals in the city of Cairo, so that the congregation can read it each Sabbath and blessed festival. Again, pointing to that same idea that the Karaites will read out of a codex on Shabbats and festivals, whereas the Rabbinites would not. So the use of Masoretic codices, books for liturgical reading, distinguished the Karaites from the Rabbinites who continued to use scrolls for this purpose. Okay? And then he goes on to other stuff. But that's his opinion. So let's sum up the 2 arguments that we heard. So argument number 1 was from this article that we saw in the Jewish Virtual Library, essentially claiming that it would be logical that the Karaites would have been, that the Masoretes would have been Karaites, specifically the Ben Asher clan, the most famous or the most reliable of the Masoretes would have been Karaites, because this is what Karaites do. Karaites are interested in preserving the Torah, the written Torah and the written Tanakh. And another argument that essentially this article brings, so he alludes to, from documents found in the Cairo Geniza, it appears that this most famous Masoret, possibly his family for generations, were also incidentally Karaites. But another kind of proof he brings is that the Saadia Gaon criticized or downplayed the authoritativeness of this great Ben Asher. And it would make sense that it would do so because this Ben Asher was considered as the authoritative scribe by the Rambam, by no less than the Rambam, who already in his own life was known as one of the greatest rabbis of that generation. And so why would Saadia al-Fayumi, aka Saadia Gaon, criticize this Ben Asher, such a great scribe? It would only be logical because he's a Karaite, because Saadia Gaon hated the Karaites and wrote polemics and very scathing polemics and letters against the Karaites. He was an enemy of the Karaites. So that's the point of view of this article. We can also maybe very briefly look at Rabbi Wikipedia. Let's do that right now. And Aaron Ben Asher. So what does Wikipedia have to say? So he lived in Tiberias, died in 960. So this is the famous Aaron Ben Asher. Descended from a long line of Masoretes, starting with someone called Asher, but nothing is known about them other than their names. His father, Moses Ben Asher, is credited with writing the Cairo Codex of the Prophets. That's the one we just saw the colophon from. If authentic, it is among the oldest manuscripts containing a large portion of the Hebrew Bible. And here, questions about possible Karaite ancestry. So let's read this. Scholars have long debated as to whether Aaron Ben Asher was a Karaite. While many modern scholars lean towards this being true, there's no clear consensus, and so the question remains open. The idea was first suggested in 1860 by Simcha Pinsker, who argued that Masoretes in general should be suspected of being Karaites since they seem to have devoted all of their time to the Bible and showed no interest in rabbinical midrash or Talmud, which at times contradicts the Masoretic text. Numerous other pieces of circumstantial evidence were prevented to make a strong case, however, not strong enough to tip the scales and end the debate. So let's see if there's any interesting things here. Encyclopedia Judaica. Okay, we can go back to this in a second. And here. Con Jeffrey. So the same Jeffrey Kahn wrote an article. The role of the Karaites in transmission of the Hebrew Bible and their practice in transcribing it into Arabic script. So we already know his opinion more or less. Some examples of evidence for this assertion. In other words, the assertion that the Masoretes were Karaites, or specifically Ben Asher, was a Karaite, strong parallels to Karaite theology in the way both Aaron and his father Moshe write about all three parts of the Hebrew Bible being equally authoritative in terms of halakha, a classic Karaite position that was mentioned earlier. We mentioned that in passing. The Masoretic text does not follow the order set down in the Talmud. Isaiah after Ezekiel, which was accepted as authoritative by the Rabbinites but rejected by the Karaites. The Masoretic text also differs from verses quoted in the Talmud. So in the Talmud, Isaiah comes after Ezekiel. In the Masoretic text, Ezekiel comes after Isaiah. It goes in chronological order. The Codex contains a prayer for the protection of a temple. Not sure which Codex they're talking about, but one of them. Of a temple, presumably referring to the Karaite temple, as the Rabbinites did not have a temple built at the time. Writings of the time refer to the Ben Ashers with honorifics more typically used by Karaites, such as Melamed and Maskil. Indications that the Codex Karaites, thought to have been written by his father, was sponsored by a Karaite, based on language used by the sponsor. The Codex was in possession of the Karaites since the time of its inscribed dedication, even before they ransomed it from the Crusaders. So, and this is what we mentioned about Sa'adia Gaon, so let's just clarify this, or let's just reiterate this. Turning point came in the 1950s when Benjamin Clar discovered that an anti-Karaite polemical poem by Sa'adia Gaon criticized the Karaite masterate by the name of Ben Asher. This agrees with Sa'adia's rejection of Ben Asher in favor of the rival school of Ben Naphtali, as well as the fact that Ben Asher became accepted as relations between the Karaites and Rabbinites improved. Aaron Dotan has dealt with many of the arguments, including Clar's, and also argued that the approval of Maimonides is evidence against this claim. However, according to Zer, few researchers have expressed their support for Dotan's position. Okay. So, at any rate, we kind of get the idea. The only other thing I would say, and we're not going to go into it now, is to maybe look at this paper here. Was the Masoret of the Aleppo Codex of Rabbinite or Karaite origin? Let's see if we can bring it up. And if it's freely available. Sure, I'll accept your stupid cookies. And it is. Okay, so you can read through this article. We're not going to do it now. Is it? Is it a 2-page article? What's going on here? 1 second. All right. Any rate, you could read this article later if you want. I'll just bring it up on the screen, and I'll type it into the comments here. So if you do a search on it, hopefully you can find it online. Okay, so we have 2 differing opinions. Hold on. Cat wants to go take a walk. Show. Behave yourself. Bye. Oh, c'est la vie. Whole cat society going on here. So we have 2 differing opinions. One that tends to say that there are various pieces of evidence that show that the Masoretes, or specifically the Ben Asher clan, were Karaites, was made of Karaites. And Jeffrey Kahn's argument that although the Karaites did later on have a very important role in, shall we say, prolonging or spreading and preserving the Masoretic tradition, that they were not, that the original Masoretes were not themselves Karaites. So inconclusive. I like to say that they were, because I'm biased and because I love to tell Rabbinites that the Torah that they use is actually Karaite. It freaks them out. So there you go. Inconclusive. I mean, Jeffrey Kahn is a pretty great scholar, and he does make some good points, specifically saying that there was no Karaite community of note in the time that the clan would have been started in Tiberias. There was not really a Karaite community in Tiberias until later, and even then, I don't know how large it was. So the timing just doesn't work out. But you never know. One never knows. So that's it. Inconclusive, but I did try to present the evidence, try to present both sides of the story, and I encourage people to do their own research. A good place to start would be perhaps to read this article. If it's only really 2 pages, you know what? If it's only 2 pages, as it seems to be, oh, this is the abstract. This is not the actual article. But we can read the abstract very quickly, okay? So, background: ever since S. Pinsker argued nearly 3 jubilees ago, I believe a jubilee is a period of 50 years, that Ben Asher was a Karaite, A lively debate has been carried out concerning whether Ben Asher was a Karaite or a Rabbinite, and so far there has been no final verdict. An important milestone in the debate was established by Benjamin Clar when he succeeded in reading the name Ben Asher at the head of the anti-Karaite polemical poem Essa Mishali. Essa Mishali. This comes from Bil'am. At any rate, doesn't matter. By Rav Saadia Gaon, and thereby established decisively that Ben Asher was a Karaite. Clark put an end to the debate, which had not been decided up until his time, because none of the many arguments of either side had been strong enough to refute the counter-arguments of the other side. Aaron Dotan, we also mentioned above, tried to refute Clark's argument and return the debate to its previous course. Dotan's discussion is encompassing and includes all the opinions that had been voiced before him, both those in favor of Ben Asher's charism and against it. However, Dotan does not suffice with refuting Clark's argument and goes on to argue that he is strong proof of Ben Asher's rabbinism. Dotan's basic and most powerful argument is that Maimonides gave his approval to Ben Asher's version. Dotan points out a further problem with characterizing Ben Asher as a Karaite. It undermines one of the most important foundations upon which the text of Scripture which we currently possess rests. It is inconceivable that this version was based throughout the generations on the text of a Karaite who is defined by rabbinical law as a heretic or apostate of the law. It goes without saying that this is not a valid argument, and in any event does not prove anything. We must relate to the facts and their meaning alone. And it is true that while the Rabbinites did consider the Karaites to be heretics, that as the Karaite community grew, and eventually during the golden age of Karaism, which is considered the 10th to 12th century CE, there are claims that half of all Jews worldwide were Karaites. I've never been able to substantiate this, but this is what's been bandied around again and again over the years. So it doesn't make sense that the Rabbinites and the Karaites, although they disagreed with each other, did work together more closely than people might like to believe. It is not my intention to polemicize against Dotan, but rather to present new evidence concerning the charism of the Masoret of the Aleppo Codex. So that's his abstract. Let's see, can we actually get it? Add to cart, log in via institution. Your institutional credentials, I might actually be able to. If I can get it, let me just see if I can log in with my. Just give me 1 second here. Just give me 1 second. Let's see if I can do this. Let's see. Yep, it accepts where I got my master's degree. University of Algarve in Faro, Portugal. Let's see if it's going to allow me to log in. And let me even see if I remember my login. I think that's it. Invalid credentials. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. Hold on 1 second. Just give me 1 second. Let me see if I can do it. Give me 1 second. And if I can get hold of this article. 1 second here. One second. Yeah, A3. Three. A70513. Maybe I forgot my password. Let me just try again. invalid credentials. Try one more. I'm not going to do it now. If I can get hold of this article, I will let people know on the WhatsApp group, okay? But if you can too, sometimes even though articles are behind paywalls, on one site, you can find them on another site. So if you can find, let's go back. If you do a search on this article, then you might be able to get the whole thing rather than just the abstract as we saw here, okay? And the author is Raphael Isaac Zer, singer, okay? I'll post that as well. Zer, no, that should be Zer at the end, okay? So he seems to, from the abstract, seems to be implying that he believes that Ben Asher was a Karaite, okay? Well, there you have it. We got two conflicting opinions. We got the reasons why those opinions are what they are. And a book to download if you want for free. The Tiberian Tradition of Biblical Hebrew Pronunciation, and this article to look up if anybody wants, okay? Any questions, any comments before we go into our actual Torah study, Leviticus chapter 23? Anybody? Any comments? Any questions? What branch of Qara'im does the synagogue in Daly City belong to? What is the attitude of Mitzrayim Qara'im towards converts? So the Daly City synagogue, they're essentially Egyptian Karaites. They are Egyptian Karaites. They are either all, I don't know about all, but the large majority either came directly from Egypt to the United States or went from Egypt to Israel and then made their way to the United States. And so they are those original Egyptian Karaites or their sons, grandsons, etc. They are very Egyptian leaning, although they've been Americanized to a certain degree. They're a little bit more open than the Karaites in the Egyptian Karaites in Israel. And what is the attitude of the Mitzrayim Qara'im towards converts? So they do have their KJU thing set up, which I laugh at every time I see it. So they have converted some. And I would say probably the Egyptian Karaites in Daly City are a bit more open to converts than are the Egyptian Karaites in Israel, because essentially that's where the conversion is performed. It's performed at the Daly City Synagogue. So they would be a bit more open, probably, than the Egyptian Karaites in Israel, but probably the older generation is going to be less open, and the younger generation is a bit more open. However, I've given my opinion on the worth or lack thereof of the KJU / Egyptian Karaite conversion. To make a long story short, I don't think it's worth the paper that's written on. Certainly not for $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 or whatever they're charging. And you can look up the videos that I did on Karaite Insights YouTube channel regarding conversion. If you go to Karaite Insights YouTube channel and you look at videos, you'll find I did 2 on conversion, and I state my my reasoning there. Okay. Any other questions? Not, let's take a very quick song break, and then we will start with our Torah study for Leviticus chapter 23. Second, set it up. Let's see. Let's do.
Yom נחמו נחמו יאמר אלוקיכם נחמו נחמו יאמר אלוקיכם נחמו נחמו יאמר אלוקיכם דברו אליו ירושלים וקראו אליו דברו אליו ירושלים וקראו נחמו נחמו יאמר אלוקיכם נחמו נחמו יאמר אלוקיכם דברו אליו ירושלים וקראו אליו דברו אליו ירושלים וקראו אליו na 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 אלוהים נתן לך במתנה דבר גדול, דבר נפלא. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה את החיים על פני האדמה. נתן לך את הלילה והיום, אהבה, תקווה וחלום, קיץ, חורף, סתיו, אביב, נשמה טובה להביט סביב. נתן לך שדות ירוקים, פרחים ועצים מלבלבים, נהרות נחלים וימים, שמיים, ירח, כוכבים.
אלוהים נתן לך במתנה דבר גדול, דבר נפלא. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה את החיים חיים על פני האדמה. נתן לך חגים ושבתות, את ישראל ארץ האבות. ידיים וראש להגשים חלומות, נתן לך את כל הנפלאות. נתן לך דברים כל כך יפים, להביא לעולם ילדים, להאזין לשירים לראות צבעים. מה רבו מעשיך אלוהים.
Okay. Okay. So let's get rid of this. Okay. So we're back. And we're going to start digging in now to Leviticus chapter 23, which we said is the list of biblical holidays or biblical festivals. We've got our Robbie altar all ready to go. Get up to the right page. 15. Okay. Okay, so let's start. We're in Leviticus chapter 23. I'm going to start in verse 1 and follow along in Hebrew if you wish. Or in English or whatever other language you feel comfortable with. And let's get going. So we have here verse 1, typical introductory verse. Vaydaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor. So notice now we always have our hints. Does it say that Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron? Or does it say that he spoke to Moses to tell Aaron? Or does it say that he spoke to Moses to tell Aaron and the children of Israel? Or does it say that he spoke to Moses to tell the children of Israel? Well, here it says that he spoke to Moses to say, speak to the children of Israel. So we know that this is not a message, or this is not a set of laws specifically dealing with the Kohanim, that this is a set of laws that deals with all of the children of Israel, right? Because we've seen in the past where it has to do specifically with the Kohanim. It'll say something like, V'yidaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor, daber el Aaron ubanav, speak to Aaron and his sons. Then we know we're getting laws for the Kohanim, sons of Aaron or the Kohanim, the priests. So here we're getting laws for all of the people of Israel. V'mata lehem, okay, Mu'adei Yahweh, asher tikra'u otam mikra'e kodesh, ela hem mo'adai. So say to them, the appointed times of Yahweh, which you should declare them, these holy convocations, a horrible translation. We'll talk about that in a second, but I'm going to go with it. Holy convocations. These are my appointed times. So let's first speak about this word mo'ed. Okay. So the most common word, really the word for a biblical holiday, is a mo'ed. Now, first of all, let's get a little bit of an etymology for this word mo'ed. Okay. So we'll just go with this Strong's lexicon just as a starting point. A appointed time meeting, assembly, festival. meaning an appointment, a fixed time, season, a festival, conventionally a year, meaning once a year, an assembly, technically the congregation, place of meeting. Okay, so so it comes, the origin or the underlying root is ya'ad, yud ayin daled, which as we see here means to point or to fix. Let's go down to the BDB. Oh, let's see if there's anything else interesting here. Just read this for the heck of it. No, I don't usually like to read this stuff, but the Hebrew word mo'ed primarily refers to an appointed time or place, often used in the context of sacred festivals, religious gatherings, or divinely appointed meetings. It signifies a time set apart for a specific purpose, often involving worship or remembrance. In the context of the tabernacle and temple, mo'ed can also refer to the tent of meeting, ohel mo'ed, where God would meet with his people. Okay, so a mo'ed is a meeting time or place. Let's see if there's anything else important here. I mean, there's a lot important here, but we're just going to skip it. Let's see if there's anything I want to read here. Right. It's an appointed time or an appointed place. Okay. So one of the interesting things to point out about this word, is that it appears already in Genesis chapter 1. Let's find that. So let's just read the English for a second. So Genesis, we're talking here about the fourth day. And on the fourth day, and God said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years. And let there be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth. So what does that have to do with Moadim? If we switch over to the Hebrew, Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. The Hebrew says, Wayomer, Elohim, Yehi me'orot b'raki hashamayim. Elohim said, let there be lights in the vault. They translate it as, it's a whole issue in and of itself. Usual translation is firmament. Let's just go with the firmament of the sky. Lavdil ben hayom uben halayla, to make a distinction between the day and the night, right? Meaning the sun represents the day, the moon represents the night. And let them be for signs and for moadim. Here's that same word, moadim, appointed times, liyamim and shanim, and for days and for years. In other words, you're supposed to count time with them. And we know, and we're going to see in Leviticus chapter 23, that every single one of the holidays, with the exception of Shavuot, is given a specific day of a specific month. And we know that the lights in the sky, the sun and the moon, are meant to, one of the purposes, as we see here in Genesis chapter 1, is to mark off the Moadim. So when it says, for instance, that the Passover sacrifice shall occur, for instance, over here, in the first month, on the 14th of the month, the 14th day of the month, we see that what are we using? We're using the moon to mark off that particular day. And we know that we as Karaites, we still go out and we observe the new moon because the Torah tells us explicitly that we're supposed to mark off the days, the Moadim, the appointed times, the times of meeting with specific days after a new moon. Without getting into the whole calendar thing, we also know that the Rabbinites who use the fixed calendar of Hillel II, which was instituted in 359 CE, more or less, they're off. They're not keeping the Moedim on the right times. They could be off by sometimes, in rare cases, as much as 3 days. Often they're, I'd say about 50% of the time, it falls on the same day. 50% of the time, it doesn't. 50% of the remaining time, it's 1 day off. So about a quarter of the time, it's going to be 1 day off. I'd say half of that remaining time. So about 1/8 of the time, it's going to be 2 days off, and then the rest, 1/16. No, I did that a little bit wrong. Then once in a while, it's going to be 3 days off. It's very rare, but it can be as much as 3 days off in certain cases. Okay, so so we see that that's what a moed is. We also have this concept of the ohel moed, the tent of meeting. Okay, so moed could be an appointed time of meeting. It can be an appointed place of meeting. And the underlying root is ya'ad. In modern Hebrew, a ya'ad would be a goal or a destination. If somebody asks you in modern Hebrew, ma ya'ad shelcha, what is your destination? What is your intended destination? Like if I am going to New York next week, and I can say in modern Hebrew, I'm talking about, haya'ad sheli hu New York. Okay, so that's what ya'ad means. Let's even look at it for a second. Try that again. Okay. So ya'ad, the verb, is to appoint, to designate, to meet, to assemble. Okay, to fix upon, to meet, to summon, to direct, to engage. To appoint, to assign. Okay, to appoint the time, and so on and so forth. Okay, no, adati means I met with them. So a meeting time or a meeting place. Okay, remember the tent of meeting was called the ohel moed. The same word as here. So it's a set aside, or it's a place. It's basically saying I'm going to meet you here at such and such time in such and such place. So that's a moed. And in fact, some of the moedim also designate a place, specifically what later became Jerusalem, the place where God chooses to make his name dwell. So we get an idea of what a moed is. It's often poorly translated as holiday or appointed time or something like that. But it's basically a meeting time, a time that is set as a destination or as an appointed time, a scheduled time when who's going to meet? When Yahweh is going to meet his chosen people, Israel. That's what a moed is. Okay, so when you see this word moed, and you see the word usually translated as appointed time or appointed times, a lot of these, here they translate as feasts, which is even a worse translation. A lot of these translations, they don't have any meaning to them. But it basically means on such and such day of such and such month, you, Israel, and I, Yahweh, we're going to meet. We're going to get together. We're going to spend the day together, or in some cases 7 or 8 days together. Okay. So now this is what chapter 23 is dealing with. It's dealing with these moadim, these times that are appointed, these times that are on the calendar for Yahweh to meet with his beloved firstborn nation, Israel. Okay, so what are these times? Well, it's interesting, and I think Robert also points this out, that it doesn't even start with a moed. It starts with the Shabbat. So is the Shabbat a moed? Well, it's never called a moed. And in fact, we'll see that in verse 4, that again, it implies that the Moadim have not yet been delineated. So why is Shabbat mentioned? Well, because although it's not a moed, it's not technically an appointed time. It doesn't occur on the 5th day of the 6th month or whatever. Nonetheless, it's related. It's associated with the moed. It's like a moed because it occurs every 7 days, occurs once a week. And the Torah works associatively. I always like to say that the Torah is the first hyperlinked text. I don't know if that's really true. Maybe it was common in ancient times, but it's definitely perhaps the most prominent, earliest, or early hyperlinked text. The Torah works associatively. It will speak about things that are related to each other, and that's how it can often jump around, or that's how verses can be placed one after the other. They have a certain relationship. Now, the rabbis take this and they fool around with it a little bit too much, and it comes to some strange conclusions. Maybe the most classic example would be that they say that because the building of the tabernacle occurs after the mention of Shabbat, that the milacha that you're supposed to refrain from on Shabbat are the same milacha, that the same work that's required to build the tabernacle. That's pushing it. That doesn't make logical sense. That's not a logical type of jump, but it is a logical type of jump. Say, okay, we're talking about the appointed times, the yearly festivals, if you want to call them that. And well, what better place to throw in Shabbat? Because Shabbat, although it's not technically a moed, it doesn't occur at a certain day on a certain month. It's like a moed. It occurs on a regular basis, right? It occurs regularly throughout the year. Okay, does that make sense? So Shabbat is thrown in not because it's a moed, but because it's associative. It can be hyperlinked to a moed. It's related to a moed. And so here we get a statement of the Shabbat. This is verse 3, Leviticus chapter 23, verse 3. Shesheth yamim te'aseh milacha ubayom hashvi'i Shabbath Shabbaton mikra kodesh kol milacha lo ta'asu Shabbat hi liyahweh b'chol moshvotechem. Okay, 6 days shall you do your daily tasks, your work. Doesn't mean you have to. It means if you're going to do work, you can do it on these 6 days. But ubayom hashvi'i, but on the 7th day, Shabbat Shabbaton, it is a Sabbath of Sabbaths, or it is a rest day of rests, or it is a Shabbat of rest. Remember, we have here repetition. Although Shabbat and Shabbaton are two different words, Shabbat is actually it's a proper noun. It's the actual title of the holiday, the actual name of the holiday. Whereas Shabbaton means a day of rest, a day on which one rests. It's not a proper name. So it's almost like saying the day of rest on which one rests. But nonetheless, we have repetition, right? Shabbat and Shabbaton are close enough to be considered repetition. And what do we say every single study? What does repetition mean in the Torah, in the Tanakh? Please, somebody type it in. Say it every single study. Repetition means going once, going twice. Somebody, come on. My students, don't disappoint me. Means emphasis. We say this every single Torah study. The Torah has no way, it does, but usually the way it wants to emphasize something is through repetition. Okay, we see this in English as well. It's very, very hot out today, or it's very, very cold out today, or this was so delicious. Repetition, emphasis, or repetition is showing superlativeness, right? Emphasizing the extremeness of, or the greatness of. And that's what we have here, Shabbat Shabbaton. It is most definitely a day of rest, or Shabbat, that is definitely a day of rest. Repetition. Okay. So it is a Mikra Kodesh. Okay. But it's not called here a Moed, but it is called a Mikra Kodesh. What is a Mikra Kodesh? Well, a Mikra Kodesh is usually translated as a holy convocation. One of the worst translations ever, because nobody, including myself, ever knew, and nobody knows ever does know what that means. And I bet if we go to the NIV, let's just do that for a second, just for kicks and giggles. So if we go to Leviticus 23 and look at a typical English translation, okay, they call it here a sacred assembly because the NIV is slightly better than the other translations. But let's go to, I don't know, King James. Yeah, there we go. Holy convocation. So what the heck is a holy convocation? What's a convocation? Well, the word con means together, like confluence, or like I don't know, confluence, I can't think of another one offhand. I don't know. Someone else give me another word with con. But anyway, you get the idea. What is vocation? Well, vocation is like vocal, right? A calling out, to vocalize. So convocation really means a calling together. It's a call for everybody to come together. Con meaning together. Vocation meaning a calling out. So it's a calling out to come together. And that's exactly, so that's what a convocation is. But let's look at the Hebrew. In the Hebrew, we have a mikra. Well, mikra is related to the word Karaite, actually, right? The B'nai Mikra is another word for the Karaites, children of the scripture, or the sons of the scripture. But that really comes from the word likro, means to call out, to read aloud, or to read. Okay, and that's why the Mikra was read aloud, and that's what the Karaites are. We are the ones who read the scripture, or read aloud that which is the written Tanakh, the written Torah. So Mikra, again, like a convocation, is a calling out, a declaration. It's a proclamation. Okay, Mikra Kodesh. So it's a proclamation or a calling out for everybody to come together. What is Kodesh? Kodesh is holiness. So literally what this means, what this says, is a Mikra Kodesh. It doesn't say Mikra Kadosh. It's not an adjective. It's a noun. So it's a calling together of holiness, or for holiness. It's basically a call out by Yahweh that all of Israel should come together on this day to celebrate it as a set aside, a holy day. The word Kodesh in Hebrew, we translate as holy. It's a horrible translation. I'm working on a translation and commentary on the Torah. Hopefully it'll be done one of these days, but it's not there yet. And hopefully it won't be boring and irrelevant. Like, oh, forget it. Anyway, but I'm not going to go there. But what this is saying is Yahweh is calling together, or we're to proclaim that this is a set apart day. Remember, we spoke about Kodesh when we were talking last week about Kodesh versus Chol, set apart, special versus just regular. It's declaring or calling out that this is a day that is set apart from the other days. That's what a Mikra Kodesh is. So it's calling out. It's a declaration or a proclamation that we should come together for this set apart, this special day. That's what a holy convocation is. Okay? And Shabbat is a holy convocation. It's called out, it's declared that each seventh day is to be the Shabbat. And what about what happens on this day? Kol melacha lo ta'asu. You're not allowed. You shall not do any work on this day. Shabbat he. It is the Sabbath. Okay, the Sabbath means, it's a proper noun. It's the name of the holiday, or it's the name of the holy convocation. What are we calling it? Let's get a better definition. the declaration of a set-aside day, or the proclamation of a set-aside day. Mikra Kodesh. Okay, the name is Shabbat, but it comes from the underlying verb Shabbat, Shin Bet Kaf, which means to cease. It's a cessation. So the proper name Shabbat really means a day of cessation, a day of ceasing. Ceasing from what? From doing milacha. We already know, we've spoken about milacha a million times. Ceasing from doing work. Okay? So it is a proclamation of a special day, and on the special day, no work should be done. It is a Shabbat. It is the day of cessation to Yahweh. B'chol moshvotechem, throughout all of your habitations. What does this mean? No matter where in the world you live in the land of Israel, wonderful. If you've been exiled from the land of Israel and you're living in Alaska or China or wherever else, nonetheless, b'chol moshvotechem, in all of your habitations, doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in the land of Israel or out of the land of Israel. That's what this is trying to say. The Shabbat is still to be declared as a proclamation or declaration of a special day. Okay? But it's not a moed. We had an introductory sentence here that says that these are the moadim, the appointed times, the times that are in the calendar of Yahweh. Yahweh put a bunch of days in the yearly calendar. But Shabbat is not one of them. We don't see it here called a moed, but it is called the Mikra Kodesh. And these are the two words we're going to see again and again in Leviticus 23. Moed, again, an appointed time that is designated in the calendar when Yahweh is going to meet with his beloved nation Israel. And a Mikra Kodesh, translated horribly as a holy convocation. Nobody on planet Earth knows what that means, but it's a calling out or a declaration that on this day, it's set aside as a special day for Yahweh or of Yahweh. Okay? So I hope that makes sense, because we're dealing. No, turning on the light is not work. It's not work. It's not work. Let me point you. That's all rabbinical. Let me point you again to my article on Karaite Insights. Oops. And you can read my opinions. Even though it's an older article, my opinions really have not changed that much. Maybe a little bit, but really not that much. So if you want to know what my opinion is of Shabbat, then I recommend reading this article. Kind of explains everything. It's on Karaite Insights, and I'll post the link here. No, you can turn on a light. You can use your cell phone. We're using our computers right now, even though Shabbat has already gone out. Hold on. I have a cat that wants to come in. Yes, may I help you? Shoham, was that you? Get your butt in here. Oh, little girl, get up here. Zachlav, get your little cat butt over here. What are you doing? Come here, baby. Come on. There you go. There you go. There you go, sweetheart. No, you can't stay there. That's where I'm sitting. Here, over here. There we go. Okay, got a whole cat thing going on here. Okay, so read the article, and that should give you an idea of at least my opinion of what Shabbat. It's really simple. Work. You people know what work is. Work is easy to figure out. If you don't want to be doing it, it's work. That's why they call it work. Okay? And so sometimes I get, and I've said this many times over the years, sometimes I get someone say to me, well, what if I like my work? What if I'm a lawyer. I really like being a lawyer. Why can I do it on the Shabbat? And I always respond, sure. You do it on the Shabbat, but you can't, but to prove that you really love it, that you're not doing it for an ulterior motive, you work for free on that day. You don't make any money on that day. Suddenly, people realize that they don't really like their work that much. So if you really like your work so much that you want to do it on Shabbat, no problem. Do it for free. Prove that you're doing because you love the work, that you're not doing it for the money. Okay. Enough said. Any questions, any comments so far? Can you all hear me? Still. Somebody please give me a Y just so I know that I'm not speaking to a wall. which I do sometimes. I've had wonderful conversations with walls. They're the best listeners. Okay, so let's move on. Let's look at what Robert Alter has to say. Okay. So, and I think he's going to point out what we just spoke about. It's somewhat surprising. Should I make this bigger? Oh, another cat. This completes the cat family. שבוע טוב, רחל, מה שלומך? שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב. חשבתי שאת שוהם. הנה הוא, שוהם. שוהם פה. עכשיו להביא יוצא. כל החבר'ה. Okay. She wants to go out. Little girl, what do you want? You want to go out too? Come on, go. All right. Went from 3 cats down to 0. It'll be back up to 3 soon. Okay, so what does Robert Alter say? It is somewhat surprising as commentaries from the Middle Ages onward have reflected that after announcing a calendar of sundry, which means various annual festivals, moadim, fixed times, the text proceeds to spell out the weekly obligation of the Sabbath day. Rashi tries to reconcile the contradiction. Rashi's an idiot. Rashi's a horrible, horrible Torah commentator. I'm sure whatever we're about to learn from Rashi is going to be completely stupid. Rashi tries to reconcile the contradiction by proposing that the mention of the Shabbat is to indicate that violation of the Shabbat and violation of the festivals are equivalent in seriousness. Don't even listen to Rashi. He's a moron. But the consequences of modern scholarship, the consensus of modern scholarship, is that these verses on the Sabbath were added. Now we're getting to documentary hypothesis. Okay, we'll read it anyway. Perhaps out of later historical considerations, such as the impossibility of observing the pilgrim festivals in the Babylonian exile. This addition would have been facilitated by a certain ambiguity in the word Shabbat. Blah, blah, blah. I can't even. Okay. And absolute Shabbat is the way he translates Shabbat, Shabbaton. The Hebrew uses a doubled construct form that generally indicates a superlative, Shabbat, Shabbaton. That's exactly what we said. Emphasis, doubling or emphasis. I'm sorry. Repetition means emphasis or superlativeness. We even use the word superlative. Okay. All right. So that's Robert Alter. Sacred convocations. So let's see what he has to say. This is verse 4, which you haven't read yet, but okay. In this recurring phrase, remember, we're going to see 2 phrases again and again in Leviticus 23. The first is going to be mo'ed, appointed time that's set in Yahweh's calendar. Second is going to be mikra kodesh, horrible translation of holy convocation. We're calling it a declaration for a special day, or a declaration of the arrival of a special day. Where were we? So he calls them sacred convocations. In this recurring phrase, the verb tikra'u and its object mikrei kodesh and cognates something that the translation intimates, at least etymology, because convocation is derived from the Latin term for calling. Call in this context obviously means to proclaim, convene, invite. Okay, so that we spoke about that. He's really basically saying what we just spoke about, right? Okay. So now we actually get into the Moadim. So we had Shabbat as a side note. Remember, the Torah is the earliest hyperlinked text. I'm exaggerating. I don't know if it's the earliest, but I like to say it that way to make it stick in the memory. It's the earliest hyperlinked text. It takes subjects that are related and places them near a main subject, or when it jumps around from subject to subject, there's something that generally relates those subjects together. And so even though we're speaking about the Moadim, and Shabbat is not a Moed, it's not an appointed time like the other festivals are, it's like a Moed because it's recurring throughout the year. Now we actually get into the actual Moadim. So verse 4, we're in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 4. Ele Mo'adei Yahweh Mikra'e Kodesh Asher Tikra'u Otam Bimo'adam. Okay, this entire verse is these 2 phrases essentially that we've been speaking about that I want you to look out for as we're studying chapter 23. Okay, Mo'ed meaning the appointed time, the time that Yahweh sets down in his calendar. Mikra Kodesh meaning a calling out or an invitation to join Yahweh for a special day, a holy convocation. So these are the appointed times of Yahweh, the holy convocations. No, we're not translating as holy convocations. The declarations of special days, or the invitations to join in special days, asher tikra'u, which you should declare them b'mo'adam, at their correct times, at their appointed times. This is almost like a play on words. Okay, mo'adim, mo'ed occurs twice. Mikra kodesh, the word tikra, to call out, to declare, to enjoin or invite people to take place and take part in. That also occurs twice. It's very typical in the Torah. The Torah loves to use alliteration, not even alliteration. It's the wrong phrase. Loves to use repetition of words, or words that are very close to each other, again to emphasize. That's what we see here. And now we get to our first mo'ed. We get to our first appointed time, our first feast, our first festival that is actually coming up sooner than we think. What's today? Today is January 11th. So let's see. We just declared the 10th month. That was around January 1st. So the 11th month is going to be around February 1st. 12th month is going to be around March 1st. Did I do this right? The 10th month, January 1st. The 11th month. Wait, did we do the 11th month? No, we did the 10th month. The 11th month will be February 1st. The 12th month will be March 1st. So Passover is going to be pretty late this year. So the earliest it will be, so the 12th month will end, and then we'll have the first month of the new year in April. So Passover, it looks like, is going to be around April 15th this year, give or take. Passover 2025. Yeah, it's going to be pretty late. That's about as late as it gets, which is nice. Actually, I like it when it's a little bit early, to be honest, because already by mid-April, things are starting to dry up in Israel. But okay, nonetheless. So the Chodesh HaRishon, so here is our first appointed time. Here's the first holiday, the first special day, first set-aside day that we have in Yahweh's yearly calendar. The Chodesh HaRishon. Pesach liyahweh. In the first month. On the 14th of the month. 14th day of the first month. Ben ha'arba'im. We're going to talk about this phrase in just a second. Pesach liyahweh. What is the Pesach? The Pesach is not the holiday of Chag HaMatzot. It's not the festival of unleavened bread. The festival of unleavened bread follows the Pesach. The Pesach is the kickoff ceremony for the festival of unleavened bread. The Pesach always refers to the Passover offering. Okay? Why? If we go to Exodus chapter 12, close this out. The original Passover. We know that the Israelites were to slaughter a lamb, take hyssop on the 14th day, slaughter the lamb, dip hyssop into the blood of the lamb, and then rub it on their doorpost and their lintels, not on their lentils, on their lintels, and then where is it? והמה בכל אלוהי מצרים עשה שבטים והיה אדם לכם לאות על הבתים אתם ושם וראיתי את הדם ופסחתי אליכם. This is the key word here in Exodus chapter 12 verse 13. Let me just read it in the Hebrew and then translate it. So this is speaking about God passing over. Okay? Haya hadam lachem laot al habatim. So this blood, the blood that you took the hyssop leaf, the ezov. By the word hyssop comes from the Hebrew word ezov. I think that's even admitted to by the standard etymologies. So you dip the hyssop in the blood of the paschal lamb, of the lamb that was slaughtered on the 14th in the evening. So this blood shall be for you as a sign upon your houses, upon the houses, Sher Atem Sham, the houses in which you dwell in which you are there. Ra'iti, this is God speaking, this is Yahweh speaking. Ra'iti et Adam, I will see the blood. Pasachti alechem, and I will pass over you, I'll skip over you. V'lo yeh bechem negef lemashchit, and there will be no plague, no what's a better word? Plague. And they translate here as plague. Okay, no plague lemashchit, to the destroying angel. Ba'akotiba eretz Mitzrayim, when I go around and I slay in the land of Egypt. Slay who? The firstborn throughout the land of Egypt. But pasachti alechem, I will pass over you. That's what this word means. Pasachti. Alecha means to pass over you. That's where we get the English word Passover. And that's where we get the Hebrew word Pesach. The Pesach is the lamb that's sacrificed each year as a remembrance of that original lamb that was sacrificed on the night before the Israelites exited Egypt. They exited actually in the morning. Okay, they waited in their houses all night long for Yahweh to kill the firstborn of Egypt, and then they got out of Dodge in the morning. Okay, so they slaughtered that lamb, and it's not called the Pesach. That first lamb is not called the Passover offering. Let me just verify that so I don't say something wrong. But to the best of my recollection, that first lamb is not called the Passover offering. It's not called the Pesach. It's just an instruction. 1 second. No, it is. My mistake. I'm sorry, it is my mistake. I take that back. Okay. So that first lamb that's slaughtered and the lamb that's slaughtered each year at that same time, that same day each year, the 14th day of the first month, when the Israelites originally slaughtered the lamb and huddled in their houses waiting for the destroying angel to come kill the firstborn of Egypt. Okay, in each subsequent year, that Passover offering is meant to be a commemoration. It's meant to be a way of remembering that original Passover offering that was slaughtered on the original day that Yahweh, after hundreds of years, we won't get into the exact number now, that's another story. After hundreds of years, that Yahweh finally remembered his people Israel and said, this is the day I'm getting you guys out of this hellhole. You're coming with me now. Okay? So that's what the Pesach is. The Pesach is the lamb that we slaughter, or we're supposed to slaughter each year as a remembrance for that original Paschal lamb, that original Passover lamb that was slaughtered so many years ago back in Egypt as the Israelites huddled, after which the Israelites huddled in their houses. So the Pesach is the Passover, the skipping over lamb. It is arguably, of all the sacrifices, the Passover sacrifice is arguably the most important sacrifice. First of all, it's done, each individual household or groups of household did, that's also described in Exodus chapter 12, do it. So it's not a communal offering. It's not an offering, let's say like the daily morning offering. It's not an offering for that is done by the Kohanim for the entire nation. Each family sacrifices its own Paschal lamb, because each family is to remember that that's what their ancestors did in ancient times. They all slaughtered their own Paschal lamb, or if the lamb was big and the families were small, they joined together. But essentially, each family slaughtered its own Paschal lamb, and so we are supposed to do this each year to remember that original exodus from Egypt. This was the big miracle that Yahweh did for his people. This is when he took them as his people, and we took him as our God. This was in a certain sense, well, you could say that Mount Sinai was kind of like the marriage ceremony, but this was like where the groom proved how much he loved his bride. He used imagery that's used often throughout the Tanakh, as Yahweh is the groom and Israel is the bride. Okay, so that's what, when you ever see the word Pesach, that's what it means. It means the Passover offering. It means the Paschal lamb. It does not mean yes, you're supposed to slaughter a lamb, but you're only allowed to do it on the Temple Mount. We are not allowed to slaughter outside of the Temple Mount. And each year, there's a group that tries to go up on the Temple Mount to slaughter the Paschal Lamb. We know that the one of the things that the Samaritans are famous for is that they do slaughter the Paschal Lamb each year. In where? In Mount Gerizim, in Har Gerizim. They slaughter the Paschal Lamb each year, right? Because they believe that Mount Gerizim, which is near the city of Shechem or Nablus, about an hour from where I am here in the Golan Heights, maybe an hour and a half. If you ever come to Israel, I highly recommend visiting the Samaritans. It's worth it. And they have a visitor center and a museum and all this kind of stuff. But so they believe that they believe that's the Temple Mount. In fact, it's the 11th commandment in the Samaritan Torah. I kid you not. I'm not making that up. They have their own version. We spoke about the Masoretic texts. So the Samaritan version of the Torah is not based on the Masoretic texts. It's its own version of the Torah, and there's some differences between it and what might be called the Judean or the Israelite version of the Torah. And one of the differences is that the Samaritans don't have 10 commandments; they have 11 commandments. I kid you not. And the 11th commandment is that that the place that God chose to make His name dwell is Mount Gerizim. So they believe they're in control of their Temple Mount. And by the way, this is one of the main problems I have with the Samaritans, as much as I have respect for them in many respects. But this is one of the main differences I have with them, that they do not accept Jerusalem as the holy city, as the place where God chose to make His name dwell. They believe it's Har Gerizim, Mount Gerizim. So that's why each year they sacrifice. They do a communal. Each family doesn't do it. They do a communal sacrifice of a Passover offering for the entire community, and it's famous. It's a Samaritan Passover sacrifice. Okay, so and maybe we'll stop after Passover. Okay, so that's the Passover offering. When is it brought? It's brought on the 14th of the month, Bein Arba'im. Okay. Here's a loaded phrase. I've spoken about this a lot lately with a variety of people. So Bein Arba'im literally means between the evenings, or it literally means the evening. And what does it really mean? So Arba'im, you could translate it as between the evenings. It's not a great translation, but we'll go with that for now. I'll explain very briefly what it means. So when you think about what the word evening, or what the evening is, okay, the evening is neither the day nor the night. It's the time where it's neither quite day or quite night. It's a mix between day and night, right? So day ends. When does day end? The day ends when the sun sets, when the sun dips below the western horizon. That is the end of the day. But when does the night begin? Well, the night begins on what is often called nightfall. I don't like that phrase because it doesn't describe anything. I like to call it maximal darkness. Okay, the sky never gets completely dark at night because we have stars, we have the moon, we have city lights. So the sky is never going to be completely black, right? There's always going to be some light. So we can't call it complete darkness, but we can call it maximal darkness. It's the point where the influence of the sun is no longer the light of the sun no longer has influence in the sky. It's gotten as dark as it's going to get for that night. And in most places in the world, it really depends where you are in the world, but most places in the world, it occurs about an hour after sunset. Okay, the farther you are away from the equator, the longer the amount of time between sunset and maximal darkness will be, to the point where if you're actually on one of the poles, it will be infinite. There will be no, or I should say it even a little bit differently. If you're in a place where there's 24-hour sun above the Arctic Circle, for instance, in the summertime, then there will be no nightfall, right? There's no maximal darkness. The sun never sets, actually. There's no sunset even. But really on the poles is where there's no change at all. There's no change there won't be any change in the angle of the sun. The sun, due to the rotation of the Earth, neither rises nor sets. The only way the sun sets when you're on the poles, or that the sun moves in the sky, no, I shouldn't say that the sun changes its height in the sky, is based on the revolution of the sun around the revolution of the Earth around the sun, not the rotation of the Earth on its own axis. Anyway, we're getting too far afield. It doesn't matter right now. The point is that that is what Beina Arba'im means. It's the hour between sunset, the approximate hour where I am in Israel. It's about an hour between sunset and maximal darkness. So maximal darkness is kind of equivalent to what the rabbis will call Tzeit Kochavim, the coming out of the stars. They look in the sky, and when they see three stars, which usually are not even always stars, because often it's one or two of them could be planets. For instance, Venus is often mistaken for a star. It's very bright. You know, other planets that are mistaken for stars as well, such as Mars, Mercury, even Jupiter and Saturn could be seen as stars. But usually it's Venus, comes out very early because it's very bright. And at any rate, that's when the rabbis look up in the sky and they can count three of these quote unquote stars, then that's when they declare the evening to be over, and that's the start of the night. I would say that's incorrect, because if you can only see three stars, the first three stars, the sky has not yet reached maximal darkness. You need to wait maybe another 15, 20 minutes in most places in the world. But the point is that Beina Arba'im is the time between sunset and maximal darkness. Okay? Isn't it a veil that's removed and placed upon us? I don't know what you're saying. I do not know what you're saying. Gumunai, 420. 420, huh? Okay. If you can explain yourself. I don't agree. My book doesn't fit your description. Okay, well, you are free not to agree. It's like Burger King, have it your way. At any rate, what is your book? As long as we're at it. Your book is okay. Our Quran. Is this Tawfiq? Is that you? Tawfiq, is that you? That might be my good friend from Morocco. Yes, we argue, but I love him anyway. Okay, if it's him. I have no idea. Okay. At any rate, getting back to this, so Beina Arba'im. So this is when the Israelites, the children of Israel, are supposed to slaughter each year the Passover offering, which we can't do again because we're not in full possession at this point of the Temple Mount. Although the needle has moved over the past number of years, even the past decade or so, more and more Jews are going up to the Temple Mount, and honestly, the police that were very strict about certain things are kind of loosening up. So you used to not be able to pray or make any kind of religious, like kneel down or bow down or anything like that. And from what I understand, now that the basically internal security is ruled by, not ruled, but it's kind of ruled, we'll go with ruled by this Itamar Ben Gvir. So he controls the police, and he's telling the police to stand down a little bit and allow some more Jewish activity on the Temple Mount. It's a long story. Oh, you're not? Okay. I thought you were my friend from. Okay. At any rate, welcome. I don't mind at all that you're Muslim. I'm happy to have you here. And I know that a lot of my Christian friends or former Christian friends will not like what I say, but I have a lot of respect in many ways for Islam and for Islamic culture. And there was a lot of interaction between medieval Islamic culture and medieval Jewish culture. So you are very welcome, even though I'm not a Muslim, even though my friends in Morocco constantly try to make me a Muslim, but for some strange reason, they never did succeed. At any rate, so Bena Arba'im Pesach Liyahweh. So during this 1 hour period between sunset and maximal darkness on the 14th of the first month. And what does it mean, the 14th of the first month? I've had long discussions with people about this. I don't want to get into the whole thing, but essentially what it means is when the 14th day ends and the 15th day is beginning. But during this intermediate period, and I'll explain exactly what the word arba'im, what the root of the word arba'im means in a second. During this intermediate period, the day can essentially be referred to still as the 14th, or it can be referred to as the 15th, depending on the context. It's a whole discussion that I've had with other people on the side. I don't want to get into it right now. But basically, during this 1 hour period at the end, right after sunset on the 14th, when the 14th is going out and the 15th is coming in this intermediate period, this mixing time between the 14th and the 15th, that is when all of the children of Israel are supposed to go up onto the Temple Mount, and each family is supposed to slaughter the Paschal lamb as a remembrance for what happened to us 3,000 plus years ago in Egypt on that day. Okay? And that is the kickoff of a moed, or a chag, I should say. And we'll talk about the word chag in a second. But I wanted to mention the word arba'im. So the word arba'im comes from the underlying root arav. Arba'im, arba'im, arav. You can hear it in there. The root ayin resh bet, or ayin resh vet, arav means to mix together. So a better translation is the mixing time. What does it mean, the mixing time? It's not quite day and it's not quite night. It's becoming, and it's not quite the 14th and it's not quite the 15th. We have to think like Easterners, not like Westerners. Westerners have a lot of trouble assimilating this concept. Hey, it's either the 14th or it's the 15th. Okay? Don't mess with me. But that's not ancient Israelite thought, which is much more Eastern. So there's a period when it's not quite the 14th and it's not quite the 15th. It's something in between. It's a mixing time. That's literally what arba'im means. It means the mixing time, or the mixes. Okay? I like to translate it as the mixing time. And what does it mean? When the sun sets, as the sun sets, or the second after sunsets, it's still very much the 14th. But over the next hour, it becomes less and less the 14th of the month and more the 15th of the month. It's a mixing time. It's a gradual switch over from the 14th to the 15th. And that mixing time, that time between sunset and maximal darkness, is when each year we're supposed to bring the Passover offering. And then the 15th comes in when it comes in gradually, but by the time of maximal darkness, the 15th of the first month has begun. And that's when our holiday of Chag HaMatzot, or the festival of unleavened bread, starts. So b'chamisha asar yom l'chodesh, on the 15th day of the month, l'chodesh hazeh, of this month, meaning which month? The first month, from the context of the previous verse. Chag HaMatzot, a festival, the festival of unleavened bread to Yahweh. Shiv'at yamim matzot tochilu. So for 7 days you shall eat only matzot. You shall eat matzot, unleavened bread. So basically, the bringing of the Passover offering, which occurs right as the 14th goes out and right as the 15th is starting to come in, during that intermediate time between the 14th and the 15th, that's the kickoff of the 7-day festival of unleavened bread. And I believe I had a very interesting discussion with somebody. You are the typical internet troll pretending to be something I'm not and aggressively coming at you in a way to answer a question without asking it. Okay. Well, great. Good luck with that. At any rate, so the Passover offering, the bringing of the Passover offering, is the kickoff of the festival of unleavened bread. And I would go so far as to say that I think it's very possible that as each family sacrificed the Passover offering, as soon as that family sacrificed the Passover offering, at that time, that is when that family was no longer allowed to eat leavened bread for 7 days, until the end of the 21st day of the first month. Okay? The Passover offering is the kickoff of this 7-day festival of unleavened bread, because we know why. So we have the theme of unleavened bread with the exodus from Egypt. We know that the Israelites, they went out with the Masoretes, but shichmehem, their kneading bowls on their shoulders. And when they got out into the desert, they were rushing out of Egypt, with such a rush that they didn't have time for the bread to leaven. And when they got out into the desert, they cooked this dough before it had leavened, excuse me, into matzot, into unleavened bread. And so that's what the 7-day festival of unleavened bread is to commemorate. It's to commemorate the fact that we rushed out of Egypt. So all of the Passover, all of the bringing of the Passover offering, followed by the 7 days of Chag HaMatzot, is meant to be commemoration. And Zecher Yitziat Mitzrayim, it's a commemoration of our exodus from Egypt, commemorating by doing certain things each year the events of the original exodus. Just like in the United States of America, perhaps on each July 4th, maybe they're going to reenact, the battles of Lexington and Concord as a way to remember those original battles. Okay, so Passover is all about remembering that original exodus from Egypt, and it's connected with the barley harvest, which we'll get to next time. Okay, but that bringing of the Passover offering, that's the kickoff for the 7-day festival of Chag HaMatzot. Why is it 7 days? After all, when the Israelites got out into the desert, there's just one incident. They didn't have enough time for the dough to rise. They cooked it into matzot, and they ate matzot. So it should be just 1 day. Why is it 7 days? Because it's important. Okay, the important holidays are extended beyond 1 day to a week. We see the same with Sukkot. Okay, so it's Yahweh's way of saying this is so important that we're going to commemorate this exodus from Egypt, not for 1 day, even though the incident of the unleavened bread just took place on 1 day. We're going to commemorate it for 7 days. Okay, so verse 7. Bayom harishon mikra kodesh ye'eh lachem. So on the first day shall be what? Here's that word again, holy convocation. We're not translating it as holy convocation. We hate that translation. We're translating it as a proclamation of that there is, or a proclamation or an invitation to join in this special day, this special set-aside day. So it's a proclamation of a special day, or that this is a special day. Ye'eh lachem, it shall be for you. Kol malechet avodah lo tasu. You shall not do any worky type things. And why do I translate as worky type things? Well, we know this word milacha. What does the word milacha mean? We've spoken about it just before with regards to Shabbat. And any Karaite has probably encountered this word many, many times. The word milacha means work. And it's forbidden on the Shabbat. That's what we see here in verse 3. Okay. Kol milacha lo ta'asu. You shall not do any milacha, not do any work. But here, with regards to the first day, specifically the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, it doesn't say don't do milacha. It uses a different phrase, malechet avodah. Now, I'll say it in English, what sounds more harsh? Don't do any work on this day, or don't do any worky type things on this day? Well, the first one is more terse. It's more the point. Don't do work. That's it. No ifs, ands, or buts. Don't do any work. Here it doesn't say don't do any work. Here it says something more along the lines of don't do any worky type things. Okay? Malechet avodah, any tasks that require work. So the implication, the Torah is very onomatopoeic. It sometimes expresses itself through sounds, through the way a word or a phrase sounds. And malechet avodah just sounds less harsh than milaka, which implies, and there's other evidence for as well, when we get to it, we'll talk about that, but implies that there's slightly less of a restriction of doing work on this first day of Chag HaMatzot, and therefore, by extension, all of the Mikra Kodesh, all of these holy convocations that occur throughout the yearly cycle, and we'll see a number of them. Okay, so yes, you're required to refrain from work, but there's not the same strictness and same harshness of that restriction that you would find on Shabbat or on one holiday where where the word milacha is used on Yom Kippurim, on the Day of Atonement. Okay, so try to avoid work. No, it's a little bit more restrictive than that. Avoid work as much as you can. No, I don't even like that. Avoid work. Okay, avoid all things that would involve work. Okay, lo ta'asu, you shall not do. Verse 8, Vikravtim ishel Yahweh, and you shall bring a fire offering to Yahweh. What is a fire offering? A fire offering is a very specific thing in the Torah. We spoke about it when we learned about the different types of offerings earlier in Leviticus. A fire offering is an offering that is thrown on the altar. Okay? Even a grain offering that's thrown on the altar. There's certain grain offerings that are thrown on the altar. We learned about them in Leviticus chapter, I believe, 2, if I'm not mistaken. Okay? They're also called fire offerings. Any offering that's thrown on the altar of sacrifice, is a fire offering. Okay? Because the fire is constantly burning there. Yahweh. So you shall bring a fire offering to Yahweh, Shivat Yamim, 7 days. Vayom Shvi'i Mikra Kodesh, and on the 7th day is another holy convocation or another calling, proclamation of a special day, of a set aside day. Kol Malechet Avodah Lo Ta'asu, and again, no worky type things shall you do. Okay? And that ends this declaration of what we do on Passover. Again, to summarize, sun goes down on the 14th of the first month. That's the same day, but that's the same time that the Israelites were to slaughter the Paschal lamb originally. And then they were to hover in their houses. They were to take the blood, rub it on the doorposts and on the lintel. Is the things on the side of the door. The lintel is the thing above the door. And by the way, might say, why not just say doorposts? Well, in ancient construction, and even in modern construction, we take it for granted. There are very different methods of construction, or there are very different considerations when you're building a doorpost, meaning that the posts that are on each side of the door, than when you're building the lintel, the thing that goes above the door, because the thing that goes above the door, the lintel, has to support a huge amount of weight. If it's a house, we take it for granted, right? We walk into a door, we see the doorposts on the left and right of the door, and then there's a doorpost above, and we don't realize that post above has to support an immense amount of weight. If it's the first floor of a house, it has to support 2 stories worth of weight, which could be bricks, concrete, God knows what. And so this lintel is actually in architecture and in archaeology, going back into ancient times. The lintel was a huge. This top post was actually had an enormous amount of importance, and it also had an enormous amount of engineering behind it. How it was built to support all that weight. One of the ways, the common ways that was used to support that weight, is it wasn't made straight across. It was made into an arch. And the arch, if you see an arch doorway, the weight is distributed across that semicircle. And essentially the stones are built to kind of come in towards the center, but there's more of a distribution of the weight. So the weight is not just sitting on this straight across beam, which with so much weight on it could potentially break. That's just a small insight into that. And there were many different ways that various building styles came up with to distribute the weight, or to prevent the lintel, this top doorpost, from or to allow it to support all the weight that's above it. But that's why we see it's mentioned separately. The doorposts are called the mezuzot, and the lintel is called the mashkof. Here I have a cat that wants to come in, so let's let him or her in. Come in, little girl. Get your butt over here. Little girl. Where have you been? You want to go on that chair there? Go, baby. Go. No scratching. Come here, baby. Come here. Come here. Zachlef, come here. Come, sweetheart. Come. There we go. Just can't block the computer. Come, sweetheart. Okay. All right. So so that's it. So that's why we celebrate the 7 days of Chag HaMatzot. It's all about a commemoration. We won't speak about the aspect of the barley harvest, We'll speak about that next time when we get into the Omer offering, the Tunufata Omer, or the wave sheaf offering. But in the meantime, we see that the main purpose of, or the main thrust of the bringing of the Passover offering and the celebration of the 7 days of Chag HaMatzot is a remembrance of those original events of the Passover so many years ago. Okay, we've reached 8 o'clock or past 8 o'clock here in Israel, so I think we're going to stop here. Let me just make a note for myself that we're starting next time on verse 9, and we'll get into the Omer offering. There's so much to say about all of this, but we do want to get through. So start in verse 9 next time. Okay. And let's throw it out to any questions, any comments. Honky Whitey Boy Cracker, who, by the way, actually is, you guys are not going to believe, is actually black. He's a black person, right, Phil? Anywho, any questions, any comments before we end it? About anything. You can ask any question about anything if you wish. Open question and answer time. Anybody? Going once? Going twice? Going thrice? Okay, so then we're going to end it. So I thank you all for joining me here on this Shabbat study. It's World Alliance of Qara'im Shabbat study. Please share the study. Now, these studies don't get nearly as many views as some of the shorts I've been doing on the World Alliance of Qara'im channel, one of which has over 10,000 views. But to me, this is extremely important. Where am I located? I am located in Katzrin in the Golan Heights in Israel. But these Shabbat studies are extremely, extremely important. So please spread the word. It's really important for us to do a deep dive into the Torah. That's the essence of Karaitism. And it's my goal to expand the studies to weekdays as well. Eventually, I'm working on it. Last week, I gave a pitch for money. I really don't want to belabor that again, but please, we count on your support. I cannot support all of the activities that we do now and that we have planned for the World Alliance of Qara'im. I have a whole bunch of things that I have planned for the World Alliance of Qara'im, some amazing things, such as setting up an actual Karaite yeshiva in Israel and other things that'll leave as a surprise. And your financial support will really help. Please donate something. If you get something out of these studies, it doesn't have to be a lot. If you can't afford a lot, it could be $5 a month, $10 a month. I don't care. But please, if you see it in your heart to donate something, please do. If you look on the original announcement, you'll see there are different ways to donate, including Patreon. You can set up recurring payments on PayPal. But please, if you get something out of these studies, it's only right and it's only fair to help us expand, because this is what it's all about. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this because this is my mission in life, number one. But number two, I truly, honestly believe that I'm doing this for the people of Israel. And so I shouldn't have to, and I cannot, bear the financial burden all on my own. So please donate something. If you get something out of these studies, again, go look at the original announcement and you'll see different ways that you can donate. But enough said about that. Please subscribe to the YouTube channels, get the word out about the studies, let your friends know. If you don't have any friends, let your enemies know. And if you don't have any enemies, then I don't know, something's wrong with you. At any rate, please get the word out about the studies. And we will, Be'ezrat Yahweh, with the help of Yahweh, website. There's two websites. There's Karaite Insights and there's the World Alliance of Qara'im. Right here, Honky. If you look right here, Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov. Next to it, www.worldallianceofqara'im.org. And also there's a donation button if that's what you're talking about. Yes, Yeshiva in the Golan. Yes, correct. That's what I'd like. And one in Jerusalem, but we'll get to that eventually. So thank you all for joining me. I love these studies. They're my bread and butter each week, and I hope they are for some of you as well. And we will go out with music, as always. And Bezrat Yahweh, with the help of Yahweh, see you again next week, where we'll pick it up in Leviticus chapter 23. So I wish you all, wherever you are in this world, a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. A good Shabbat, a good Shabbos, and a good week. Shavua Tov. And let's go out with some music.
כילדה אור על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקי, כילדה אור על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקי. צמא נפשי לאלוקים, צמא נפשי לאלוקים, לחי. מתי אבוא, מתי אבוא ואראה פני האלוקים, הילדה אור על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקים, כילדה אור על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקים. צמא נפשי לאלוקים, צמא נפשי לאלוקים, לחי. מתי אבוא, מתי אבוא ואראה פני האלוקים, הילדה אור על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקים. צמא נפשי לאלוקים, צמא נפשי לאלוקים, לחי. מתי אבוא, מתי אבוא ואראה אל תערוב על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תערוג אליך.
צלצולי פעמונים בתוך ליבי מהדהדים, עליהם הדרך ליבי פוגש, ליבי אומר ומתרגש, עוד אין לי כאן למענך, דמותך הולכת ומתרחקת, כאן אני אל מול ביתך, דמותך הולכת ומתרחקת, כאן אני אל מול ביתך. עיניי